This is the Dynasty Roundtable podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for clicking the download button, viewing on YouTube. Tonight, it's my turn. I get to select 16 players to target in your Dynasty startups, one for each round. Obviously, this applies to trade targets as well. Basically, what these players are players that I think are undervalued at their current ADP, and we're about to talk about them. But Matt Babich, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I think we had a very fun recording yesterday, a fun show, and I'm excited to hear your side of it. I feel like I passed the test. I know we're a show, we're supposed to be doing content, we should be having disagreements. But at the same time, when I go through this process, my first thought was, if Seth has a lot of problems with this list, I probably did something wrong. Because we generally have a lot of the same evaluations. We differ in certain places, but when we're talking about ADP and biggest values at ADP, just putting together a huge list, it's a test of my dynasty skills. So I feel good that you were with me on a lot of things and at the very least accepted my point of view when we did differ. And I'm excited to see where you're throwing out here today for me. I think there's going to be, just like in my turn, a lot of friends of the program, people who we've been talking up during our latest mock draft and other episodes talking values. So I'm excited for the good people to hear Seth's testament.
Yeah, I thought you did really well. I thought I didn't have hardly any issues with the players you picked. And I can't fake it, Matt Babich. I could pull a Skip Bayless and fake some outrage, but I don't know. I don't know if I think I'm too stupid to fake it. You know what I mean?
No.
I tell my what.
You have too much dignity.
That's right. I have too much dignity, but I tell my wife I'm too stupid to be somebody else. That's how you know. Like I am who I am, and that's it. I don't know what to say. I couldn't, if I was having an affair, I feel like that would be very, very exhausting. Like, you know what I mean? Like having this double life, whenever I see it in a movie, it stresses me out. So when I look at dynasty takes, and if I agree with them, I'm going to say I agree with them. If I don't agree with them, I'm going to say I don't agree with them. And I just so happen to agree with most of your takes last time. We'll see if you agree with some of mine. Let us know what you think of these in the comments. Without further ado, let's get started with my round one selection. And we have the fancy graphic again. And my pick is Malik Nabers. Now, the case for Malik Nabers, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due because I was on the South Harmon AMA. Shout out to them. Go follow them too, wherever they go. And Adam had me on. Michael was not there. He had some other matter to attend to, personal, important stuff. Malik, he absolutely obliterated me in this choose your fighter debate because I waltzed in there with my attitude. I mean, there really wasn't much prep, if I'm being honest, to the show. It was kind of like, come on, it's an AMA. People are going to ask questions and, we'll do a choose your fighter debate. And I was like, oh, great, cool. And then I waltzed in there like, I'll just choose Justin Jefferson as my fighter. And he chose Malik Nabers and absolutely obliterated me because he pointed out that Malik Nabers is still just 21 years old. Malik Nabers had a better rookie season than Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase in their respective rookie seasons. Malik Nabers, 18.2 fantasy points per game, Justin Jefferson 17.1, and Jamar Chase 17.9, respectively, in their rookie seasons. And Nabers had by far the worst situation with the likes of Daniel Jones starting for 10 games. Then I don't even have it pulled up in front of me, but there was 7 games of, was it not Ben DiNucci, but it was just awfulness at quarterback. Danny DeVito.
No,
that's right. You remember
Tommy DeVito.
Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito. It might as well have been Danny DeVito at quarterback. I tell you what, it was awful. And this year, the quarterback situation is not stable. I will give you that. But it's hands down. I mean, you can't really make an argument that it's clearly better with Russell Wilson. Even have backup plans. You know, if Russell Wilson isn't good, then you have Jameis Winston, and they drafted Jackson Dart. The coaches could change, but it's hard for me to see Malik Nabers really going anywhere because he's clearly their best player on offense. Now, maybe he gets disgruntled, maybe he demands a trade, but you also can't really deny that there isn't anybody there on the roster for target competition. I mean, you know, if you look at the New York Giants roster, they don't even have a tight end that scares you. And Theo Johnson, it's like Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson,
Theo Johnson, nobody of significance there.
So how is this guy not getting a 30, at least minimum 30% target share in this offense in a division where, let's face it, they're not as good as the Eagles. They're not as good as the Commanders. And there's probably going to be some shootouts with them and the Cowboys, even though I know the Giants have an improved defensive line, but I just don't understand why Malik Nabers isn't even being considered as the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, because Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, 25, 26 years old, respectively. Malik Nabers, just 21, going to be 22, but I think you can make a strong case for him being the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. And I really want to build a team around Malik Nabers this year. I'm going to have to hop in a startup or something because I have that itch, and I just have the Malik Nabers fever. And the only prescription is a Dynasty startup where I take Malik Nabers. So tell me your thoughts.
Well, first, when you get in that startup, let me in on it because I've had that itch as well. We could do a video of the draft for the people.
Mm-hmm.
And funny that my best player value was Jalen Hurts, yours is Nabers. And in the league that you just joined, an orphan, I have both of those players. And it is very fun to roster both of them. I fully agree with every single point you mentioned about Malik Nabers. The one caveat I will mention, and it's a relatively insignificant one, is that Malik Nabers did have the worst situation as a rookie. But in terms of target competition and number of targets, Malik Nabers arguably had the best situation as a rookie, as opposed to Justin Jefferson going into an offense with established connection with Adam Thielen, who had been posting some pretty elite numbers in terms of fantasy points and target percentages, with Kirk Cousins and Jamar Chase, who was stepping into, an offense with T. Higgins as well. So there's some significant target competition there. So that's the one caveat. That being said, it doesn't change any of your points about Malik.
All right. I will move on to my next player, another wide receiver, and you're going to find out something about me. If you didn't already know how I like to build dynasty teams, you're going to find out tonight, because my first 2 picks are wide receivers, and young wide receivers at that can help me win now. Puka Nacua, 24 years old. There's no question when he's on the field and healthy, he's a top 5 option at wide receiver in fantasy football. Last 2 seasons, number 6 and number 2 in fantasy points per game in 2023, 2024. In 2024, even though he was hurt, number 1 in yards per route run, 4.07 yards per route run. Number 12, also, he was efficient after the catch, number 12 in yards after the catch, even though he played in just 11 games. He's tied to Sean McVay. And here's the thing. I hear this a lot. People concerned, Matthew Stafford might retire. I think the Rams are a smart organization. They have 2 first-round picks in next year's draft, in what should be a better quarterback draft. I have to believe that they are going to do their homework in the offseason, and they are going to find their quarterback of the future, assuming they can get up and get him. They're going to do everything in their power. The Rams are aggressive. For a team that basically had the attitude, F them picks, saving up 2 first-round picks is pretty meaningful, at least to me. So this quarterback situation, I'm not as worried about, because I think that they're going to have a plan. At minimum, I think they can lure a veteran to Los Angeles to play in the offense. Devontae Adams is going to be there, but outside of Devontae Adams for target competition, yes, they have Tyler Higbee. Yes, they drafted Terrence Ferguson, but it's like Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington. Puka Nacua is going to get still a 28%, 27% target share, somewhere in that range again this year. And he just turned 24 too. So getting Puka Nacua and Malik Nabers, I feel like I have my wide receiver position on lockdown, which is exactly what I want. So what are your thoughts on Puka Nacua?
Matt Harmon, I just saw this tweet before heading into the showroom. Matt Harmon moved Puka Nacua up officially after reviewing his second season charting and his stats, moved him into an elite tier, the elite tier of wide receivers. So his elite tier was Chase, Jefferson, CD, Nico Collins. I'm missing one. Malik Nabers, and Puka Nacua.
Nice. Yeah, I mean,
so
yeah, I agree. I think he is elite too.
What he mentioned was it was specifically the separation and that in specific improvement in his game that in his eyes took the biggest leap. And it really, you felt that connection in that push to get Puka the ball and have him be the engine of that passing game. And I agree that no matter who the quarterback is, Puka's going to be getting his. And what we just saw with Malik Nabers and what we've seen from receivers on bad teams, Jamar Chase last year, wide receiver number 1 overall in fantasy points per game. The team did not win a lot of games, didn't even make the playoffs. So they don't have to be this, one play away from an NFC championship team. They could have a bad quarterback and a bad team. With Puka Nacua and where he wins and how he wins, he is someone who's QB proof. So you don't necessarily need to hyper focus on the future when you have a 24-year-old elite receiver. It'll get figured out. He'll get his targets.
Yeah, I think Joe Burrow is pretty good, right? Joe Burrow is a pretty good quarterback. But anyway, I
didn't say he was a bad quarterback.
Yeah,
I said they were on a bad team.
They're a bad team. Yeah, I got you. There's some people.
Daniel Jones is a bad quarterback. Malik Nabers did very good. Did very good in fantasy. It was an example of a bad quarterback and a bad team.
Exactly. Danny DeVito too took snaps there. All right, I'm gonna cheat in round 3, and I fully expect to take heat for this. CJ Stroud, according to Dynasty Data Lab, is the first player off the board in round 3. So I cheated and I took him, because he is 23 years old, and I sort of view him, and let me know what you think of this working theory that I have, as a younger, cheaper, poor man's Joe Burrow. And I start to see what Houston's starting to do. Nico Collins, I think he's an elite option. Matt Harmon, you said, has him in the elite tier. They draft Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. They sign Christian Kirk, and they have Joe Mixon at running back. If Jaden Higgins can be what I think Jaden Higgins can be on the outside to pair with Nico, if Christian Kirk can be the bridge to Jalen Noel, and don't forget that they have Tank Dell, who's injured and potentially could contribute something at some time, I think this offense is going to be really good. And we were talking before the show how CJ Stroud, his stock has fallen since his first year. But that offensive line was just horrible last year. It can't be much worse this year. And they've improved his weapons. They were counting on Tank Dell. You remember everybody was super high on Tank Dell heading into the 2024 season. I had Tank Dell outside my top 36 in redraft rankings. I was catching a bunch of heat for that. And it had everything to do with the concerns that we saw play out in the end. And this affected, and I think Nico Collins got hurt too. All of it affected CJ Stroud. So he kind of has this nightmare season after this amazing rookie season. And again, when CJ Stroud, and he was a top 5 asset, according to Keep Trade Cut in Superflex rankings, when he was a top 5 asset, I was hitting the sell button and I was making videos about how you need to sell CJ Stroud because he doesn't belong in the same category as Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. I mean, are you kidding me? There's no way. He doesn't run enough. And I heard it then too. Oh, how could you sell CJ Stroud? Well, now that he's dipping into the 3rd round and he's player 26 overall on Keep Trade Cut, and I see what this offense, I see what they're starting to build here. And I see the fact that last year, CJ Stroud was number 11 in pass attempts, number 8 in deep ball attempts, but the pace of play dipped severely in 2024 to 27th in the NFL. When CJ Stroud was running the offense at an efficient pace, at a high speed pace in 2023, they ranked number 7 in the NFL in pace of play. Clearly, he played a lot better. So I would assume that that's what they're going to get back to in 2025. And all these weapons that they added are going to help them do that. I'm not saying he's ever going to be a top 5 option at the position because I don't think he has the rushing upside. But if you're telling me this guy is going to be locked in back end quarterback 1 for the foreseeable future, and I can depend on that kind of production from him, sign me up in the 3rd round. And if he's going to continue to dip, I'm going to continue to buy.
Yeah, I like where you're going with that argument. He is an elite thrower of the football. And this offense is going to take a step forward. We got a big bolstering of that wide receiver core from going from Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, who, it's no shade to them, but an aging Stephon Diggs and a Tank Dell. The system didn't work that well. It's not really a talent thing. And they're building a better system with Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, Christian Kirk. I really like how these pieces complement each other more so than I did last season. And you take into account health, the offensive line is going to be the biggest variable. But that's a short-term problem. You're buying a 23-year-old quarterback with elite upside in the 3rd round. I don't think it's cheating because he's a 301. If he deserves to be a 2nd-round pick and he's in the 3rd round and a quarterback in Superflex, that seems like a pretty reasonable equation to me.
It's the clips that just like the one you just shared with me in the private chat that I'm watching right now. I mean, this defensive end is offsides, gets a clear rush at him, and the CJ Stroud keeps his eyes downfield and throws a dart in the back of the end zone. It's plays like that get you excited for football season. And it's why we talk about it the way we talk about it in June. And I'm still a little bit upset that the Bears passed on CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels. I just got to hope Kaleb Williams is good. So anyway, let's get to an oldie but a goodie on the channel. And I know everybody now is saying, oh, I was the first one who was on Rashee Rice. Of course we've been drafting Rashee Rice this whole time. We were just keeping it a secret because we're the geniuses of fantasy football and nobody else is. You must listen to us and no one else. I know that there are those people out there, but I hate to say we've been talking about Rashee Rice this whole time, and now he's going insanely high in best ball drafts. And these best ball drafters in June, it's a clear momentum is going in that direction. Rashee Rice is being pushed to the moon. And he's still, according to Dynasty Data Lab, he's still a round 4 player, 44th overall. He's the wide receiver 17 off the board. And I have to think that this ADP is going to go up as more startups continue to happen, continue to take place. Rashee Rice's ADP is going to go up. He's going to creep up into the 3rd round. I could see him creep up even into the 2nd round. So the $1 million question is, how far up do you take Rashee Rice? When we did our dynasty rankings, when we go check out our wide receiver rankings episode, we had Rashee Rice as our 9th overall wide receiver. And I'm fine taking him off the board at wide receiver 9. So what would that mean in terms of Dynasty Data Labs ADP? That would mean at the 2-3 turn. That's where it would be, right? With Drake London and CJ Stroud. Now, I would probably would take him after those players. I mean, I think it's a toss up with Drake London, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why. And we've said some of this stuff on the channel before, but if you're watching for the first time, I'll go ahead and repeat some of it. Obviously, he's young. He just turned 25 years old on April 22nd. He's tied to Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Chiefs. The suspension, according to Drew Davenport, is likely not going to come down this year. And this is a new stat that I should probably tweet this out. So when Rashee Rice in his career saw over a 70% snap share or more, he has averaged 18.9 fantasy points per game. Last season, Justin Jefferson averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game, and he's averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game over his career. Last season, Jamar Chase averaged an amazing 23.9 fantasy points per game, but he's averaged 19.5 fantasy points per game throughout his career. Amon-Ra St. Brown last season, 18.6 fantasy points per game. So you see the kind of upside, and that's through 8 games. There have been 8 games when Rashee Rice has seen a 70% snap share or more. So it's a limited sample size, but it's more than the sample size of just the 3 weeks or 4 weeks that he played in 2024 before he got hurt. And really, he only played in 3 weeks. So I think, and the other argument is, well, Xavier Worthy showed that he could take over Rashee Rice's position last year. And to that, I would say, Tank Dell. Tank Dell. If you want to go ahead and carry out the experiment of putting a 160-pound wide receiver in basically what the Chiefs did with Xavier Worthy because they had to last year, I don't think that that's going to play out well for you. And I think the Chiefs know that because they had Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice on the same team, and they chose to use Rashee Rice. Now, did he have more experience than Xavier Worthy? Yes. But Xavier Worthy's first touchdown came on an end around, for crying out loud. Xavier Worthy was always, I think, going to be this player, at least how I think he should be used and how I think the Chiefs were planning on using him. This player who had flashed some upside that they could use in certain packages and really utilize his speed in the deep passing game and on some of their trick plays like end arounds and whatnot. I don't think you can utilize him the way that you can utilize a 6 feet tall, 200-pound wide receiver like Rashee Rice. It just doesn't make any sense. So not only does Rashee Rice have the right build, but I think he's going to get the opportunity this year to be, and I'll say it, a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. So I absolutely think all of this buzz is justified. It is risky, but sometimes we have to take risks in fantasy football and in Dynasty. I just happen to think that this is one of those risks worth taking because, I mean, the ceiling is the roof, to quote Michael Jordan in this one.
Yeah, I don't need to spend much time reiterating. I do want to reiterate one thing, which is stop. If you're thinking, look, and I've seen some people who I have a very high respect for their process and their opinion when it comes to football and fantasy and the way the game is played. Tell me what you saw, man. Like, I got to hop on a chat with these people and just ask, what did you see that I didn't? Because I had them in fantasy. And so when I have someone in fantasy, especially in my main leagues, like, I'm watching you. I'm watching every route. I'm tuning in. And the Chiefs are on so many primetime games. Man, he was not doing anything close, even from a target earning perspective, from week 12 on when you look at 2023 for Rashee Rice. The production and the target earning, particularly in the red zone as well, Worthy is not matching that. He's not. And they would be foolish. How does that offense work if Worthy is then taking these Rashee Rice roll touches? Like, there's no one to keep the defense honest downfield. And I'm not saying, I do believe that Worthy is going to take a year 2 leap. And I'm interested in certain like best ball formats for this year. But to say that he's like usurping this role or like going to negatively impact. Rice basically over the course of an entire season, when you factor in like the back half and then the first quarter of his first 2 seasons. So he has 3 quarters of a season at a 25% target share with efficient production in terms of yards per route run on top of it.
Yep.
These are the predictive metrics. So look, I don't know what to tell you if we're still disagreeing, but hey, maybe somehow we're going to be wrong,
And I'll add this too, and this is a Seth cliche at this point. Teams tell you the truth when they make their moves, when they make their trades, when they draft their players. And the only wide receiver of note that the Chiefs added was Jalen Royals in round 4. And I like Jalen Royals a lot, but if you think Jalen Royals is going to take the place of Rashee Rice, I think that's very unlikely. Now, I think Jalen Royals has a lot of upside, and I absolutely think he could earn a role in this offense, especially considering I don't think Hollywood Brown is going to be with the team, very long. I think he just signed a 1-year deal. I could be wrong, but I still think Rashee Rice is just teed up to smash this year. But let us know what you think in the comments. I'm going to move on to my next player, and that is J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy's being taken at pick 50, according to Dynasty Data Lab, right after Trevor Lawrence, right before Quinshon Judkins. And I understand what the risks are. This is a guy who hasn't taken an NFL snap in the regular season. He's 22 and a half years old, but he might have the best young offensive-minded head coach who was able to get the best football out of Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold. And we're going to see how Sam Darnold does with Seattle. I'm not optimistic. And we saw how Kirk Cousins played out in Atlanta last year. It wasn't great. Also, the weapons are amazing. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hockenson, and and Aaron Jones. And they added Jordan Mason. That's fantastic. McCarthy also put up back-to-back consistent, albeit not spectacular, seasons at Michigan when he played there. So the college production, the last competitive football that he played, in 2023, he completed 72.3% of his passes. And the knock on him, and I think that this is kind of funny, is, well, he didn't throw for 3,000 yards in college, but he did throw for 2,991 yards, 22 touchdowns, 4 picks. So and also he has a rushing floor. So he's not going to rush like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, but can he give us 200 to 300, maybe even 400 rushing yards in a year? Yeah, absolutely. So I think if Kevin O'Connell can do what he did with Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins, that J.J. McCarthy is going to be a good, efficient quarterback at the NFL level. Think Brock Purdy plus. That's kind of what I see with J.J. McCarthy. So what do you think? Is this a good pick? Tell me.
at worst, it's my second best value in this round with the updated and correct ADPs that I did not reference in my video. But I may lean Trevor Lawrence because I think they both have very good offensive situations. I am a Liam Cohen believer, and I'm a Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter believer. I think they'll get their running back room figured out. Their running back room is pretty equal to Minnesota, and I would argue the potential of Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. is greater than that of the potential than Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. TJ Hockenson is more kind of evens the playing field out versus Brenton Strange over in Jacksonville. So we can call it similar offensive situations. Good play callers, and on one side, Minnesota, the play caller is more established, and on the other side, the quarterback is a little bit more established. We've at least seen something from Trevor Lawrence. We've seen highs, we've seen lows, but we've seen something. So that's the risk trade-off. If you want to bet on a slightly safer option in Trevor Lawrence, but somebody who, in my opinion, has the same upside, or you take the rookie, someone who has a little bit more stability over the next few years. If Trevor Lawrence doesn't deliver with Liam Cohen, then who knows what happens? We know he's a coveted prospect of yore, but that doesn't matter at a certain point in your NFL career, and he is getting close to that point now in his second or third head coach, and an organization that probably will have a shorter leash this time around as they look to turn things around. So I am pro JJ McCarthy here. I can't say for sure whether I think he's truly more of a value than Trevor Lawrence, but I'm 50-50 there.
Fair enough. And for the record, I think Trevor Lawrence is a fine value too. I just prefer JJ McCarthy and the upside that comes with that. And through 5 rounds here, I have not taken a running back. That's going to change with this next pick, and Kaleb Johnson. So Kaleb Johnson, according to Dynasty Data Lab, however you data. I don't. Somebody tell me how to say data. I think it's data. I don't know. Who knows? Kaleb Johnson is player 70 overall, ranked just ahead of RJ Harvey. I think it's funny that those two guys are ranked back to back, because I think that's perfect. Those were the two guys in this round that I was debating on. And Kaleb Johnson is 21 years old. He's going to be 22. He's a rookie. We know this. He had an insane year at Iowa, scored over 60% of their touchdowns. He showed that he can catch passes too. 22 receptions in 2024. That's a 10.4% target share. That's really good for Iowa. Now, he's going to be in an Arthur Smith offense in the AFC North, in an offense with Aaron Rodgers and not much else, to be honest with you. They have DK Metcalf, but outside of him, it's Robert Woods, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller. At tight end, they have Pat Freiermuth. And then, it's really the running game with Kaleb Johnson and Jalen Warren. And I think Kaleb Johnson's going to be able to come in and do what Najee Harris did last year right away. And I think he has the most upside out of all those running backs. I know Jalen Warren is there, but just listening to what Mike Tomlin, and I'm going to shout out Theo on Twitter, because he put out a tweet about Mike Tomlin talking about Kaleb Johnson. And the quote was, "Kaleb has an awesome skill set. He has a unique blend of experience and youth that's very attractive for us." So we have the head coach, a hard-nosed Mike Tomlin, kind of going out of his way to praise Kaleb Johnson, which is not something typically that coaches like Mike Tomlin do. So for all those reasons and more, I want all the Kaleb Johnson. And for that matter, I want RJ Harvey too. So if somebody takes Kaleb Johnson, I'm going to be pressing the draft button on RJ Harvey as well. Wouldn't mind some of the quarterbacks in this range either, like a Dak Prescott or a Bryce Young. So this round was very difficult for me to make a choice, but I ultimately chose the running back. Matt Babich, did I choose wisely or did I make a mistake here?
Well, this is a great round to dissect, because you mentioned Bryce Young, Dak Prescott. Kenneth Walker is also earlier in that round.
That was your choice.
Who we both love. And what you did, you didn't take the running back. You took the cheapest, the second cheapest player on that list, because RJ Harvey is a pick one behind. But I love the frame of mind there, where we're putting these assets on a playing field, saying we believe they're in the same tier, and you went with the cheapest one. And that completely ties into what we've been talking about over the past months of just accruing value everywhere you can in dynasty startups and in trades. And I think this is a great example of that.
Moving on to a tight end. And it's the tight end I've been talking about for a while now, because he is coming off of a season where he came back from an injury. He is discounted right now. He is according to Dynasty Data Lab, ADP 76. He's going to be 28 years old, which isn't as important for tight ends. We forget that TJ Hockenson had back-to-back seasons of tight end 4 and tight end 2 in fantasy points per game in the 2022 and 2023 seasons. He's going to be fully recovered from the torn ACL, MCL injury. And the Minnesota Vikings, even with a rookie quarterback, I mean, heck, with Sam Darnold last year, this is an offense that you can lock in 4,000 passing yards basically every single season. And I get it. There's going to be a lot of target competition, but there's also going to be a lot of opportunity in the offense. And I'll just say it. I think TJ Hockenson can finish as a top 3 tight end again, even with these rookies coming in and challenging for that spot. George Kittle potentially being a really nice option with, Brandon Ayuk being on the shelf for a while and Deebo Samuel being out of town. I think TJ Hockenson can carve out enough volume in this offense to be a top 3 tight end because he was number 1 in target rate amongst tight ends in 2024. When he was on the field, he was getting targeted, and we have the same play caller, which we love. And also the added bonus here of getting to stack him with JJ McCarthy. So thoughts on TJ Hockenson? I know you've been pro TJ Hockenson in the past, but what are your thoughts about TJ Hockenson here?
I love that you get to spin this and pretend that we're actually drafting a team and that you got a stack by
that's what I do. It's like Cody.
That was slick.
Like Cody.
Yeah,
it's like Cody with
like
his,
Cody Carpentier. In the mock draft, he doesn't just take the best available player. He drafts a team, and then he makes that a point of emphasis as he goes through the entire mock. But you look, and it was kind of a frustrating season because when a player like Hockenson comes back from an injury like an ACL, especially a later season ACL, you want to see an inflection point. You want to be able to look back in the data and say, this week it changed. But that didn't really happen with Hockenson. And that's for a multitude of reasons. Sam Darnold is probably one of them. Because the entire offense, we started to see Sam Darnold seeing ghosts. It started to happen more during the year as defenses figured out how to bring the pressure on this Minnesota team. And when Darnold was faced with pressure quickly, it was not good. So what did that mean? Well, TJ Hockenson had to start running less routes. Now you get somebody like JJ McCarthy who isn't a pumpkin under pressure. And granted, he hasn't done it yet, but if he's anything like he was at Michigan, that's something he's going to be able to handle is, moving up in the pocket or escaping the pocket, freeing up Hockenson to actually run routes. So I while there isn't that inflection point this year, we have to look at the offensive improvement holistically, along with an entire offseason of Hockenson recovering that knee and getting back to his old self.
Yeah, and I think a rookie's best friend is the tight end. So I think you could see his target share go back to where it was in those seasons in 2022 and 2023, where he was just, I think the Vikings acquired him in 2022. So it's split between Detroit and Minnesota, but that season was phenomenal for him. So I think he can get back there. He's young enough, and we know age doesn't matter as much for the tight end. So we'll move on to my round 8 selection, which is Tua Tagovailoa. And according to the data, he is player 87 in Dynasty Data Labs ADP right now. And this is simple for me. I was looking around in this round, and it's kind of a weird round. You have Tyreek Hill, Alvin Kamara, 2 older players. I didn't necessarily want to go in that direction. I'm not really into Tyreek Hill right now. Mike Evans, similar story. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is a little bit overrated. Then we had a rookie quarterback in Jackson Dart. I thought about that, but then David Montgomery, I thought about him too. My affinity for David Montgomery. But then Luther Burden, Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, Jaden Higgins. I thought about all those wide receivers. But at the end of the day, it really came down to value for me. So I had to ask myself, would I trade Tua for any of those players. And I couldn't bring myself to do it in the hypothetical situation that I presented myself. So I felt like Tua at 27 years old, even with the concussion issues, even though those are, I mean, that's serious. And, his career could be over with the next hit that he takes. I fully acknowledge that. But this seems like an insane value to me because when you look at his production over the last 3 seasons, 18.4 fantasy points per game in 2022, quarterback 9 that season. In 2023, he was quarterback 16 in fantasy points per game. And then last season, he was just outside the top 12 in production at quarterback 13. I also like his coach. I also like the players around him. He still has Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, and Devon Chan. And I really think that this ADP here of him being quarterback 24 just doesn't feel right. And it just feels like it's injury motivated. And I'm willing to take the risk and roster Tua as my quarterback 3 in this particular situation and go out and acquire him if I need a quarterback, because I believe in him from a talent perspective, and he's never going to be a top 10 option, but can he be a high-end quarterback 2, low-end quarterback 1 in terms of production? He's proven that he can do that. So I'm more than fine taking him at his current value.
Yeah. In the interest of time, I'll start being brief with my responses here, but I agree. And the one thing I'll say with the injuries is there's another player, and I know receivers and quarterbacks are different, but there's another player that was in the same boat back in 2019 when he was playing with the Patriots. Brandon Cooks was also virtually one concussion away, or at least one bad concussion away at that point, from potentially having to call it a career. And it did. I wasn't as in tune with the industry then, but I do remember it kind of working its way into the narrative of the fantasy space. And he's still playing to this day. So it's not unheard of for players to figure out how to avoid these hits. And like you said, I also believe it's worth the risk.
All right, moving on to round 9. And this to me, and we'll see what you think of this. To me, this is one of the bigger smashes at running back, and that's Isiah Pacheco. He's 26 years old, or 25 years old, going to be 26. He tried to come back from a broken fibula too soon, and at least to me, this clearly affected his performance. It affected the way the Chiefs used him. And don't forget about 2023 when he was completely healthy. He finishes the RB14 in fantasy points per game, 15.3 fantasy points per game in that season. And the next season in 2024, he was a common round 2 pick in redraft leagues because people saw what I saw, and he was going to be the lead running back in a Chiefs offense that was probably going to score a lot. During that 2023 season, Pacheco ranked number 13 in snap share amongst running backs at 61.2% and number 8 in opportunity share. So people thought, okay, he's going to get that again. And he was off to a decent start, but he just got hurt. Now, the teams tell you what they think of their roster by the moves they make. And the Chiefs did not add another running back other than Elijah Mitchell, and they waited until round 7 and drafted Brashard Smith. Now, do I like Brashard Smith? Yes, I do. Do I think he's as good as Isiah Pacheco, even though Isiah Pacheco was taken in round 7 as well? No, I do not. Not at this point. And also in that 2023 season, Pacheco ranked number 10 amongst running backs with at least 100 snaps in PFF's rushing grade during the 2023 season. Pure and simple, I do not see any difference between this year and last year in terms of his opportunity. The only difference is Isiah Pacheco is coming off an injury, which he has clearly recovered from by the time the season starts. And tell me, he's likely going to get 60-70% opportunity share again in this offense unless something unforeseen happens. I mean, what am I missing here?
No, nothing. You have the right frame of mind there. I do think he's going to be a draft casualty next year. There's not going to be much time for an unstellar running back in this offense to to survive without some sort of competition. But I do like Pacheco. I probably would prefer Trey Harris or Josh Downs in this range, but that also depends on your team build and your outlook. If you're a win now, I would absolutely take Pacheco over those other two.
Now, this next one is a bit polarizing. I went in between the Bills wide receivers, but I ended up landing on Keon Coleman. And I'll acknowledge that I don't really have much NFL data that I can give you that supports this, other than the Bills drafted him really high, and I think he's super athletic. He's really young. 22 years old, caught 4 touchdowns last year, 19.2 yards per reception. And the Bills desperately need somebody to step into the alpha wide receiver role. And Coleman has the most upside to do that. I also like Khalil Shakir. He was my original pick here, but I'm somebody who likes to go for the upside, likes to go for the home run, and Keon Coleman could be a home run. There's a world where Khalil Shakir fits into that Stephon Diggs-like role, but I'm going to bet ultimately on Keon Coleman, the guy they took in early round 2 last year, as opposed to the guy they took in round 5 a few drafts ago. So what do you think about Keon Coleman in round 10?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, Seth, I hate it.
Okay.
My ideal is 0% Keon Coleman. He's not an X receiver in the NFL, and he is probably going to continue to be forced to be one, given the roster that Buffalo currently has. So this is per FTN contested target rate. Keon Coleman was over 30%, second among this sample of receivers. And he was also under 25% contested catch rate, which was third worst among that sample. So not only was he being targeted in a contested situation very heavily, but he was coming up with the football very little of the time. And these struggles were very evident. I do think there's probably going to be some sort of rebound. So when we start talking about like wide receiver 50 and ADP, sure. But I don't think that this is I've been out on him since he was a rookie. I just don't think he's a serious fantasy asset in this game, unfortunately.
I will agree with you in the sense that I was never huge on the prospect. To be perfectly honest, I just wasn't bought into him. But looking at what the Buffalo Bills have at wide receiver,
but they didn't have anybody last year.
I understand, but he was a rookie last year, and sometimes these things take time. And Khalil Shakir led the team in targets with 100 targets, and Josh Allen and this team are just, I mean, they didn't do anything outside of adding Joshua Palmer, Elijah Moore, and Laviska Shenault. So that tells me that they believe in their 2 lead wide receivers, which at this point are Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir. So if he gets 100 targets, which is possible, it's on the table, he's going to return value at this pick at 22 years old. I'm betting that he's going to increase his value, and then maybe I look to get off of him. That's kind of the approach that I'm taking. So I don't disagree with some of your points. This is a pure value play for me.
At what point do we recognize the Bills as a bad front office and start changing the way we view them in fantasy just because Josh Allen is – because I get what you're saying in terms of the belief, but they haven't done anything with their roster over the past 6-7 years that makes me think that they're competent, and their belief doesn't mean anything to me. Because they can believe all they want, but if Keon Coleman can't get open because of Josh Allen, and they did not improve that roster. They took a look at their weaknesses and didn't address them. Why were they drafting a running back in the 2nd round? I like James Cook, but that was a bad pick.
I mean, he's been pretty good for them.
But look what these offenses have been capable of doing, whether it's going out and making a splash on a Derrick Henry or getting a Pacheco. When you have a good enough offense and you have Josh Allen, you could set up that run game. We're talking about Ray Davis being a value, and if he were getting opportunities, what he could do. Like, so that's what you could do with a run game. Why, if you're that strapped for talent in your offense, it's all about offensive firepower in this day and age. You got to have receivers. You got to be able to pass the football. You have no business spending a second-round pick on a running back if there are wide receivers that could potentially help you. And then you go out and you blow a first-round pick on Keon Coleman.
Second round pick, but yeah.
Second round pick.
Basically the first pick in round 2. Because they traded back a couple times.
Because Leggett.
I don't know.
Leggett.
Yeah.
They traded
Pearsall
back.
And Leggett went.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pearsall and Leggett went. And then.
But hey, we disagree here. That's very okay.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Trey Benson is up next. And to me, this is another player that I want shares of Trey Benson. He's 23 or will be 23 years old. He was very efficient with his touches last year, number 15 in true yards per carry. The problem was he only had 63 carries and 6 targets, but I think that's going to change this year because James Conner is 30 years old, and the Cardinals did not add a running back of note. They are banking on Benson contributing more in year 2. He almost has to if this offense is going to be more efficient than it was last year. What do you think about Trey Benson? Is this a good pick in round 11 of a dynasty startup, Mr. Babbage?
Absolutely, it is. Fire up Trey Benson. We love a dip when a rookie doesn't perform to the massive expectations we never should have put on them in the first place. Because Trey Benson, it was pretty clear that was going to be James Conner's backfield. We would have liked to see a little bit more in terms of involvement, but when he did get involved, he was actually performing really well. He just couldn't crack and get more touches, but that's going to change over time. Love the pick here.
All right. Moving on to round 12, and this might be a little bit of a wild card for some people, but I, especially in the specific scenario where I have a win now team, I am going out and getting shares of Jauan Jennings because I think that there's a world where he is the 49ers wide receiver 1 for an extended period of time. He's going to be 28 years old. He's 27 right now. ADP is 136. And Brandon Ayuk's likely not going to be healthy to start the season. We know Debo's gone. And with Brandon Ayuk out of the lineup, Jauan Jennings averaged 14.4 fantasy points per game. And he's likely going to be the lead outside receiver with Pearsall playing inside. And he also has high upside because in week 3, when Debo was out, and we all know that he's going to be out for the 49ers for the entire season because he's playing for the Commanders. He scored 46.5 fantasy points that week. So I think what I'm getting in Jauan Jennings here is a high upside wide receiver. And the kicker is that for fantasy, the 49ers have an easy schedule. So Jauan Jennings I think is good enough to feast off of what is going to be an easy schedule. And I think he's good enough to take advantage of this opportunity in a Kyle Shanahan offense with Brandon Ayuk missing time. Now, I will say, if Brandon Ayuk comes back sooner than expected, I might lose some of these trades, and I might lose out on some of the value I could otherwise take in round 12. But I'm looking at the situation going, I think that there's a good possibility that Jauan Jennings for a win now team could be a very valuable asset.
I completely agree. I've changed my tune a little bit here because of the news from Brandon Ayuk. So it's been speculative for a while, but his recovery seemed to be going well. But there was something that the team never really confirmed that had always been suspicious or theorized by people, that is, he did tear his MCL and get that repaired as well. They never revealed that, but some details that Brandon Ayuk shared recently have led people to believe that he, in fact, is kind of confirming through his details that he did have his MCL repaired as well. And that would extend his recovery timeline. And now I'm seeing, fantasy PTs out there with plenty of experience in these timelines saying it'll be a while before he's 100%, more of a back half 2025, 2026 guy. That's from Matthew Betts. And so with that, like you said, presents immense opportunity for Jauan Jennings.
Moving right along, another player that I think is going to have a lot of opportunity this year is Javonte Williams. We talked about him a little bit on yesterday's episode that's going to drop on Wednesday. This episode will be out on a few days after Wednesday. So if you're watching this episode, that episode's live. So go check out that one. Matt's 16 players. but Javonte Williams. Now, Brian Schottenheimer, when he's been a play caller, and when he wasn't the play caller the last 2 seasons because Mike McCarthy was, he tends to run the ball more than Mike McCarthy, like significantly more. Now, that could have been because that's what Pete Carroll wanted, and he was the head coach in Seattle. But Javonte Williams is 25 years old. Javonte Williams needs a fresh start. And currently, the running back depth chart is not inspiring. It's Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, and Miles Sanders. Now, I believe that Dallas should be a pass-first offense because that's how Javonte Williams was used last year. I couldn't believe this when I looked it up. Javonte Williams was number 5 amongst running backs in targets with 70. Like, how did he rank number 5 amongst running backs in targets, yet be so terrible for fantasy football? So I think the Cowboys potentially could use Javonte Williams as a bell cow because Jaden Blue is going to be a rookie. Miles Sanders is not very good. I don't know. I think it might be unlikely, but they could use him in like this 200 to 250 carries, 50 targets type situation. It's possible. I don't know if it's likely, but it's possible. And in round 13, I'm willing to take the chance on Javonte Williams making the most out of his next situation. What say you?
We talk about it time and time again, just targeting ambiguous situations. Like, if you want to get Javonte Williams or you want to get Miles Sanders, fine by me. I think given the cost of both, Javonte Williams is the better bet, especially in Dynasty with him being 25. But this is the exact scenario where you have an ambiguous situation, running backs that have been pushed down the totem pole. If my roster is deep enough, I'm interested in rostering both Javonte and Miles Sanders because I do believe even if Javante's not used as a bell cow, they could both be getting enough opportunity to be borderline RB3s in fantasy. And one of them is probably going to come out being usable because Rico Dowdle did. And I'm not, It's no shade to Rico Dowdle, but I would like to think a man in Javonte Williams, who was 22nd among running backs in fantasy points per game as a rookie, can get back to some of that production here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the Rico Dowdle point is great because that's pretty much what he was last year for the Cowboys. Moving right along, and this is, again, I like to target running backs later in my drafts, and Jordan Mason is one of those guys I'm going to be looking to acquire, especially if I have a win now team, because he's 26 years old. Aaron Jones is getting up there in age. He's 30 years old, coming off a season where he touched the ball over 300 times, which I suspect is why they brought in Jordan Mason in the first place. Jordan Mason was very efficient last year, 4.8 in true yards per carry, which was number 7 amongst running backs, over 5 yards a carry overall. And while he's not a target earner, that's what Aaron Jones is for in the offense. And also there is some touchdown upside here as well because Jordan Mason profiles as a much more effective goal line running back than Aaron Jones is at this stage in his career, and really ever, because Aaron Jones is a sub 200-pound running back and Jordan Mason is 220 pounds plus. So what do you think of Jordan Mason in round 14 of a dynasty startup?
I like it. I think I like Rachaad White a little bit more, but I think the thesis of him in Minnesota is a great play, and he's definitely, right up there in terms of best values in the 14th round.
We'll go through these last two relatively quickly because they're upside plays, they're contingent upside plays. And Ray Davis, he's a little bit older for a second-year player, but I like it when you get a peek behind the curtain and see what happens when a player gets a 60% snap share. And that's what happened in week 6 last year. And he scored 18.2 fantasy points. And so if Ray Davis gets the opportunity, I feel like he's going to score fantasy points. The problem is James Cook is in the way, but James Cook is a lighter running back. There's a contract situation going on right now. And Ray Davis is clearly, to me, one of the handcuff running backs that I want to own. I get it. I think Ty Johnson is still there on the roster, but I think Ray Davis is going to be the guy they use in between the tackles, and Ty Johnson they use more as a pass catcher, so that does limit the upside a little bit. But I'm still in on Ray Davis at his current value. What do you think?
I am as well. For all the reasons that I just went on a diatribe about the Buffalo Bills front office, but I agree.
Gotcha. Last pick in round 16 is going to be DJ Giddens. And the reason for DJ Giddens in round 16, I was looking around Jonathan Brooks. I just don't know. Tyler Algier, Ollie Gordon, Tank Dell, Adonai Mitchell. Christian Kirk could be a nice option. And if you don't know what these names are that I'm listing off, these are all the options in round 16 that we could choose from that Dynasty Data Lab has. DJ Giddens is actually a round 17 pick. He's the first pick in round 17, but I do think he has a lot of upside because Jonathan Taylor has dealt with injuries in the past in recent years. And if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, Khalil Herbert is the next running back up on the depth chart. I've watched Khalil Herbert very closely. He's had his moments, but I don't think he's a complete running back. And I think if that were the case, if Jonathan Taylor went down with an injury, I do think DJ Giddens would get at least some playing time. If not, maybe if he proves that he's the better running back, which is very possible, he could get a full workload. And I think this is a player with a lot of upside, a player that I want to stash everywhere. But what do you think?
Yeah, I like DJ Giddens as well. It's the thesis of Evan Hull. We thought Evan Hull could somehow be that guy, but I don't know about you. I like Giddens a lot more than I did Hull as a prospect, so I like this fit.
Yeah, I do too. And sometimes those stashes don't work out, and the thesis can be good, and I think it really came to fruition. The scenario where Jonathan Taylor, gets hurt or is banged up at times, and they just went in a different direction. And so, yeah, it's fine. And that's why you have these roster spots on your team. You kind of have to stay up on it and, keep churning through players. And DJ Giddens is going to be one of those players that I'm likely going to keep on my roster for, depending on how deep your league is, but like he's a definite rosterable stash for me. So that is my list. Any final thoughts now that we've both gone through this? Any final thoughts here on this exercise?
Yeah, you might not say, I'm going back to the Bills. You might say that the trade was fine at the time, but also let's remember that this is the team that traded Justin Jefferson for Stephon Diggs.
That is true.
They did that. Now in the moment, it kind of makes sense. You trade away a first round pick, you get a Diggs in his prime, you go for a Super Bowl, but still, not enough people talk about this. Like the giving Von Miller, what was it? A $120 million contract as a 34-year-old edge rusher. Like on top of things like trading for $14.5 million receivers when you could be drafting them on a rookie contract. It's the little things that add up over the years and put you in bad spots.
What's funnier? The fact that the Vikings made fun of the Eagles for taking Jalen Reagor, or the fact that the Eagles have had way more success overall than just about any other team in the NFL. Like, I don't know. That to me, the Vikings being like, oh, what idiots, like not to say that the Vikings are a terrible organization, but the point in me bringing that up was Jalen Reagor was the pick before, I think. And
yeah, the Vikings it's a hilarious mistake, but at the time you're like, okay, well, I guess when you look at it, how he's batting, 999. So I guess you can, for most GMs, that's like a critical error, a career ender. But for Howie Roseman, it's like, yeah, we'll take that one on the chin. We didn't get Justin Jefferson, but we still won a Super Bowl. We got to another Super Bowl. We're going to be competing for another Super Bowl this year. I'm Howie Roseman. They got this guy. I'm just gonna get the most athletic defensive end that has some sort of character concern, and it's gonna work out. And my teams are gonna be awesome, and I'm gonna win Super Bowls. Must be nice.
Oh, this coming from
from
a
the Patriots
Patriots
fan.
fan.
I know.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, trading with Ryan Poles one spot so you can get Jalen Carter because there was no way the Bears were going to take him, because the Bears had Matt Eberflus as their coach, who apparently was going to get fired in Indianapolis, and they didn't have to fire him because the Bears hired him as their head coach. Talk about terrible organizations. That's going to do it for us. Let us know your worst, the move that your team made, that the Jalen Reagor move that your favorite team made. Let us know in the comments. I got there in the end.
Yep.
All right. That's all that matters. Mine was Kevin White. Kevin White was a top 10 pick, and it was Ryan. It was the other Ryan Pace. Ryan Pace. His first ever draft pick was a complete bust in Kevin White. And I pretty much knew that he was going to be honest with you, because I didn't see that guy run anything but straight line routes at West Virginia. So anyway, not to bring that up again, but what is it for you real quick before we get out of here?
For the Patriots, it's N'Keal Harry.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. That is a good call.
Or actually, a lot of people might think it's N'Keal Harry, but now that I think about it, I do think selecting Sony Michel, a pick before Lamar Jackson, is probably much worse.
Yeah. Oh, I could rehash all the
quarterbacks
just in recent,
you didn't take.
yeah. All the quarterbacks, and the Bears could have taken Aaron Rodgers. Fun fact. They did not, because they were too good for that. They could have had Jaden Daniels. They could have had CJ Stroud. So we're just hoping Caleb's good, and I believe in Caleb. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But that's going to do it for us. But thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more episodes. Click the like button, subscribe, and click the alarm bell, which will tell you when new episodes drop on the channel, because we are going to have you covered all summer long, all season long, with all the Dynasty you can handle. So stay tuned. Until next time, nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. Have a great part of your day, whichever part of your day you're in, afternoon, evening, or morning. Make it a great one, and we will see you later.